Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. I'm probably going to say this a couple of times as people join. You got your glass of water, Nick? You feeling good?
Brilliant, waiting.
You got your cheese water.
Mm-hmm. Do things properly.
We're going to be joining. We're going to be starting this at 2 minutes past 10. Just let people join in. For anyone that's missed, we are recording this, so people will be able to catch up as well. So won't be long. Hope everyone's appreciating my cactus in the corner. It's doing very well. And also our marketing team's light boxes. So they're guilty. I'm covering them up today.
You need kind of like high level on the laptop screen, don't you? So you can point it downwards and see them.
Yeah. Hi, Chris from London. Feel free to use the chat today. We'll be launching some polls throughout today's call. It's going to run for about 30 minutes. We know how busy everyone is in this space. So plan is that we'll do this for 30 minutes. We'll have some in webinar polls coming through as well for you guys to engage with, and we can share the results as we kind of go through today. So yeah, we'll kick off. I hope everyone is doing well this morning that are joining. Nice sunny day here in London. I've had my coffee and I think we're ready to go. So yeah, a little bit of background. So I'm Dan Maimon. I head up CX, so client experience at Harri. My role touches UK and US, so I see a lot of kind of legislations that happen in every state in the US, and also everything that's happening around the Employee Rights Act coming into the UK as well, which is quite interesting. So it's quite nice to be supporting the UK market with everything that's compliance. My background is I'm from hospitality. You know, people know me quite well. A lot of people that joined, but started my hospitality career scooping ice creams at the age of 16, and then all the way up to kind of general manager and regional ops. And that's where I met Nick. Me and Nick worked together at Jamie's Italian, and we both then pivoted, should we say? We like that phrase at Harri, into software and hospitality. And we've been here nearly 7 years now. So Nick's joining. He's now a product manager, and he's supported quite a lot with our development in our product over the last couple of years, very much around the workforce management, logbook, and other things. So we'll touch upon that. This isn't so much of a product showcase, but we will touch upon some of the features that we have launched over the last couple of years and how we can support you as well. And then we also got Isabel. So Isabel's a very good friend of us at Harri. There's so much happening with all the different things that have happened over the last couple of years, and keeps us abreast and informed with some of our breakfast mornings that we host and so forth. So thank you so much for joining us for this morning. So yeah, I'll be MC this morning, moderating today's call, and also getting some extra information from these guys around what we're doing, how we're doing, and how we support you guys as well. As we know, the hospitality industry is made out of a majority small businesses. There's a lot of change happening relatively quite quick. We know it's not easy when everything kind of gets drip fed through and things get launched, and then we don't get all the guidance as well. So Isabel will be helping some of that conversation today as well. But yeah, to start off with, I know Mihailo is going to drop a poll on the screen just to start conversations that you guys can engage with as we go through this as well. So yeah, I guess the first thing we kind of want to go through is kind of what's happened. I know so much has changed. I know a lot of people on the call today will know what has happened maybe since December, Isabel. So if you want to just give us an update of like what's happened since December, and then we'll go through then in a couple more minutes around what is coming up, I guess. So do you want to give us the headlines around what's been happening since December?
Yeah, so obviously we've been talking about the Employment Rights Bill for quite a while now, for about, 18 months. It feels like a lifetime, really. We've been talking about it for quite a long time. And in December, we were, or certainly I was anyway, watching the ping pong between the two houses in terms of getting things finalized. I'm not sure anybody else was reading the transcript, but I definitely was, because I find it quite interesting. And we finally got to a point when we've got an Employment Rights Act. 2025, which absolutely changes a lot of the landscape of employment law in a very interesting way, and not completely unheard of. We've had the Employment Rights Act in 1996, but this is effectively a very big change, a very big shift in the employment law kind of world, which is going to bring loads of changes. And even I have to keep on top of it. I have to keep listing and when things are going to be happening, whether it's this year, next year, a possibility or a maybe, because all of this is definitely happening.
Yeah, what key things have kind of come to surface, I guess? So we've got, let's start with day one SSP, I guess. Should we start there? What's kind of changing on that front?
So statutory sick pay, obviously we've removed, as of April, so in about 10 days time, 6th of April is when this is changing from a statutory sick pay perspective. We're removing the waiting days, removing the period of incapacity, there's a 4 days rule, and removing the threshold, which removes some of my work because I was actually quite liked working out the period of incapacity and the waiting days, which most people tended to forget about, and explaining the complexities around how you calculate when it kicks in and when it doesn't. That's made my job simpler, which means I don't have to show off how clever I can be when it comes to days and adding things up. And instead, it means that anybody effectively qualifies for statutory sick pay from day one, which is a good thing in a way. It simplifies matters, but obviously it's an added cost to a business. So it means more management, more keeping on top of the absence and actually dealing with the absence as something that is important to the business as opposed to just leaving it be. Because obviously in the past, the occasional 1 day, 2 days wouldn't have required anybody to be paid, whereas now you're going to have to be kicking in on that payroll side, paying the statutory sick pay. Not a huge amount of money, but when you're bringing it up to a company level or even a small business, it's obviously going to be relevant in terms of the overall cost.
That's fair. And hospitality has a historically high absent rate in this space, and I know the pressures there. So Nick, I know you've been working on kind of an absence flow in the product. Do you want to touch upon like how we're helping some of our customers around that with some of the changes that we're launching?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things we're trying to introduce is obviously ensuring there's an easy flow for recording these absences, or specifically since sickness for this kind of cases. It's always been a bit of a kind of disjointed kind of process for us, and we're trying to streamline that by if an employee is absent for any reason being, whether it is due to sickness, when you're kind of resolving the reasons for why, you'll be able to record the reason why they missed the shift as a sickness, and that then automatically kind of give you the ability to add in the sickness request as well. So kind of removing that disconnect from my hand to kind of add in your missed reasons and then navigate to different areas of the system. It's all streamlined and in one process.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things when absences weren't so important, that it leans into other things we'll touch upon in a minute around probation periods and things like that and managing that. But capturing the absent reasons in the workflow when you're completing the schedule, when you're completing timesheets, things can be crucial. So that'd be really helpful as well. And then Isabel, I know another thing as well, let's touch upon day one flexible working. I know bartenders are not going to be requesting to work from their bedrooms. I think we spoke about that the other day, right? But what do you perceive kind of changing on that front?
Well, I mean, that's just a continuation of what we've seen, isn't it? Flexible working a number of years ago was something that was introduced just for a certain kind of population of workers, when you had caring, responsibility, that kind of thing. That's been broadened to include everybody, being broadened to include everybody from day one, being obviously broadened to have that justification that the employer has to give to refuse. And now, as of next year, we've got to also have that reasonableness, that kind of that test of the tribunal being able to look at whether that refusal, not only does it meet the legislative criteria, so the kind of one of those 8 reasons, but also is reasonable. So it does mean that the employers are going to have to look at accommodating first, and as an exception saying no. Hopefully the hospitality sector should be more able to manage this, because obviously in a lot of cases you just cannot work from home and you've got certain shift pattern and you've got those business needs, but it does require that extra kind of thinking around, managing that, having those processes in place, having those conversations, recording those conversations, and making sure that it is managed appropriately, especially in a day and age where people do want that flexibility. They do want to be able to work from anywhere, whenever it suits them, and it's managing that with the needs of the business.
And the flexibility request, so a little bit of insight for me to gather. So is this more around remote working, or is it a request on flexibility? So like, I don't want to work Saturday nights anymore, or how does it look?
Anything, a flexible working request is a change to effectively the way you're working, whether it's the kind of the days or the hours. So I might be requesting to work compressed hours. I might want to request to work different hours, different shifts, or indeed working from different locations, whether it's be at home or indeed from any location. So it's any of those changes that somebody is requesting. And now it's a day one right, which has been now for a bit. It's a day one right, and it needs to be justified in terms of, if we're going to be saying no to it, why can the business not accommodate? And that test is now. So if you can't accommodate it for that worker, you need to justify it. Can't be, I can't accommodate it because I'm worried 15 people are going to ask tomorrow. Well, they've not asked. So it doesn't matter. Yeah. Can you accommodate this one worker? And then when somebody else asks, can you accommodate them? And then work on that basis.
Fair enough. I saw a question come through. We'll go through some product items in a minute. I'll collect the Q&A. So just for awareness, please keep the questions coming. And then third-party harassment. Myself and Nick worked in hospitality. We know how difficult that can be around third-party harassment. You get drunken lads coming in and all sorts, right? So how's that kind of changed? What guidance have you had for people over the last couple of months around this? And have you seen anything come to light?
But third-party harassment is an interesting one because, again, it's been those ups and downs in the registration, and that we don't really know what we want. So we used to have, in place, we used to have some registration around liability of the employers for third-party harassment, and then that was removed a number of years ago. And it is now back in, and it's going to be back in terms of direct liability from the employer unless they've taken all reasonable steps. What's interesting is we don't actually know what those reasonable steps are going to be until a few months after the registration gets enacted, while the registration is passed, but until it becomes effective in October. And then the guidance on reasonable steps is expected to come in 2027, which is going to be quite interesting in terms of managing that. It is tricky because you can't control how people behave, and the hospitality sector is full of people who are going to be let loose. They're going to behave in ways that maybe are not the most professional. This isn't a professional environment for them, but it is a professional environment for the staff. So from your point of view, is looking at doing those risk assessments, and that's really going to be your starting point, understanding where the risk lies, managing it, being consistent, and actually acting on the behavior, and making sure that you've got that consistency, that framework, you know what you're doing. So if you want to ban people, then you need to ban them. It's not a question of, well, I ban those ones, but then this one has been bringing around business, so I can't afford it. It's going to have that consistent policy behind it, underpinning, and the risk assessment highlighting what and where you need to do things.
Yeah. Have you seen any cases raised around this yet, or?
No, I mean, we do get quite a lot of harassment cases generally anyway.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we've never had any direct third-party harassment case. It's often managed. One thing that we always say is how you manage situation is absolutely key in stopping it escalating into a case. And I would imagine that's going to be even more the case when it comes to third-party harassment. So if a colleague complains about third-party harassment, it's kind of getting that reaction from the manager, getting that support, getting that framework, and kicking in that policy. That's going to make the whole difference between a straightforward road and a potential claim to the tribunal. I think the claims will be fairly limited, hopefully. But yeah, it's about how you manage it.
That's fair. And Nick, from your perspective, you work quite a bit with Logbook, our product. We know that everyone uses it on today's call, but it is available. Do you want to touch upon like that sort of product that we have around tracking kind of issues that have potentially happened? I know you're working on things as well for future pipeline around like issue management and stuff, but do you want to touch upon that a little bit?
I mean, yeah, Logbook's it's a great tool to be able to kind of assign tasks, create checklists, and actually kind of record day-to-day entries as well as to what might be going on within the business. It can use kind of from anything to recording your temperatures within a kitchen to the number of complaints that are coming back from customers as well, and the general items of what's happening within the business as well. Everything can be kind of date tracked as well. Ensures completion of any tasks you might assign out to managers as well. So it's just a great piece to aid in compliance of anything needs to be done within a restaurant or anywhere within hospitality.
Yeah, it's great as well because we've managed to do it on the mobile, so managers can do things while they're on the floor as well, because the last thing you want is to go back into the back office, forget something happened, and you know what it's like. We've been there.
Oh, yeah, I remember back in the day, you used to spend half time running up and down the stairs to go back and forth in the office, and you missed the kind of the vitals of what's going on the floor, wouldn't you? Whereas nowadays you haven't got the time to do it anymore. So having the ability to do all these things, we offer the exact same kind of functionality on the mobile version as we do on the web. It's all in the palm of your hand, so you can still do the same job while you're out and about doing things.
Yeah. And Isabel, one of the things that has changed quite a bit over the last 18 months ago is around the tipping transparency and tipping legislation. And that's been a minefield in itself. Back when we were at Jamie's, we had trunk masters, we had difficulty trying to track everything. Like, it's a minefield. And I know TipJar just raised new funding. They're going to be expanding and growing, which are good partners of ours. But what's happened in this space and what's changing?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, with that legislation? It's a bit of a controversial one when it started having the whole conversation around the tip needs to go to the workers. I've got different views on that. Obviously, it's about the organization as well. It's not as straightforward as saying the tips, should go straight to the worker, but by the same token, it does need to be reflected in the work, obviously, because they come from the work that they're doing. So we've had all this legislation kind of bringing that into place and saying, those tips need to be kind of fed into, the direct workers, needs to be having that transparency. And what we're getting now this year, later on in October, is a requirement to consult before you bring in that tipping policy, which you have to have. And that requirement to consult is going to be quite important, which kind of goes line in line with a lot of other changes in the legislation around that corrective voice and bringing that corrective voice into the workplace. And we're going to have to listen to people more, whether it's through union or directly through that, bringing that corrective voice in-house, which personally would be my preference. And that's going to be the way to manage a lot of those legal changes, including bringing that tipping policy in through that consultation with the workers to make sure it makes sense to them and it works for the business.
Yeah. How do you see that going with most of the hospitality industry is small businesses, right? So I guess that would be a lot easier to manage quite small. Do you imagine that's quite difficult at scale when you've got 1,000+ locations, or?
I think every situation is going to be different, and everyone will have difficulties and challenges depending on the scale. I think whichever way we're looking, we're going to need to find a way to engage with the workers, which is what we want, especially with the qualifying service being reducing and the need to avoid tribunal claim. You want a workforce that is engaged. You want people who feel they've got a voice. We're also dealing with a new generation of workers who are wanting that purpose, that sense of cause and that sense of purpose. Again, that corrective voice is going to give them that. Whether you're dealing with a small business or a large business, it's bringing in those forums or those ways for people to feel they're being heard. That can be done quite easily at small scale, but sometimes that can be quite challenging. Bigger scale, you can have representatives, and that works quite well. Personally, I try to do everything to give the workers a voice that they feel comfortable with, and that will also limit the ability of unions. I'm not a big fan of unions, I put it out there, of unions kind of coming in and taking that over, which I don't think is the best way forward. Now, I'm ready to be convinced otherwise, by all means, but my view would be if we can bring that in-house, that gives more power to the organization.
That's fair. That's fair. And as an ex-operator, I think this is the biggest worry that I would have as an operator around 0 hours, guaranteed hours. Like, do you want to, Nick, that would be a challenging one for us with all the flexibility that we did have. What does it mean, Isabel? I think it's 2027 now. I can't remember.
Guaranteed hours is an absolute minefield. I mean, the legislation is actually quite interesting to read with all the letters and everything. But we're still lacking quite a lot of the details, unfortunately. We know it's coming up in 2027 with guaranteed hours. We don't actually know the threshold in terms of who's going to be hit, who's going to be falling under the scope of that requirement to offer guaranteed hours. We know it's likely to be a 12-week kind of monitoring period in terms of looking at the 12 weeks to determine what hours are going to be worked and what guaranteed hours should be given. It's going to be very challenging because it will be requiring that constant offering of those guaranteed hours to those workers, and that comes with potential penalties around curtailing shifts. So if you offer a shift, you offer a shift to a whole group, WhatsApp group, and say I've got a shift on Saturday, but then one takes it, you cancel it for the rest. What does that mean from a penalty point of view? We're going to be waiting for that information, unfortunately, in the coming months to see how that works. What that means is what the businesses need to do is think about what shift do they need and trying to give that kind of, not rigidity, but giving that structure as much as they can in a world where a lot of workers actually want the flexibility. So it's going to be quite an interesting one to navigate.
Yeah, it's one of the things we've been working on from a product perspective. We have a lot of this in the US across different states. I understanding in the schedule, when you've been in the schedule, if you're understanding what they've worked over the prior weeks, depends on the state to make sure that you're aligned. Also workflows then to trigger to say, hey, this person needs updated documentation, they're over their contracted hours and so forth. So we are keeping close to this, and yeah, and the legislation changes that may happen there as well. There's a lot to think about, Isabel, and I know the right to switch off was dropped, right? So that
It has been dropped.
minefield. It's in California, and we have a large presence there, and like the notifications on mobile phones, we have to be careful there, and so forth. So I guess that's a good thing. Is it?
That's something to watch out. I think it will probably come back. It's already been there in France. It's there, I think, in Belgium. There's a few other countries where it's definitely been implemented. Some with more teeth than others, or some with more meaning to kind of that implementation, whereas some it seems to be more of it's a nice thing to be saying, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It is going to be happening. We just don't know what it's going to look like. But obviously, with a lot of the changes, I can see that happening at some point in the future, and people are going to be wanting the ability to switch off from work, which isn't a bad thing. It just needs to be managed with obviously business efficacy and how we work around it.
That's fair. That's fair. Being a dad myself, I know things are changing from a maternity perspective. I think this is a good change personally, because I think people are cautious in getting new jobs because you have to qualify, you want to set up a family and so forth. So
yeah, so we've got paternity leave, parental leave, both of them. We've got the qualifying service has been dropped, so nobody needs to have that qualifying paid of service before they qualify. You're absolutely right. That's the right thing to do. Paternity leave is quite short, and parental leave is unpaid. So I think both of those, the qualifying service wasn't really something that needed to be there, because you're only talking a couple of weeks of paternity leave, and you're talking about unpaid leave when it comes to parental leave, and something that isn't really used that much. So it's going to be easier to qualify. That's definitely a good thing. It goes alongside a number of legislation, kind of bringing up those family-friendly rights in terms of various types of leave. We've had neonatal leave coming up last year. We've got bereavement loss coming up next year. So again, we've got various changes to try and make things, as you say, a little bit more, a bit friendlier when it comes to managing your family and managing your workplace.
That's good. And another thing, obviously, we've been under a huge amount of strain and pressures in hospitality. Unfortunately, we've seen some redundancies happen, closes and so forth. There's some changes coming up as well around redundancies, if I recall.
We've got some changes. We've got the doubling up of the protective award coming up this year. So that means that when you're doing a corrective consultation, if you mess it up, instead of looking at a potential 90 days protective award, you're looking at a potential 180 days protective award. When you multiply that by potentially, obviously, it's going to be 20 or more workers. That can be quite significant. So it does require more thinking about, has the threshold been met? And there are plans for those thresholds to slightly change next year, and we're waiting to see on what that means. Effectively, again, it goes within the same framework of we want that corrective voice. We want to be, communicating with the staff and having reps in place and having those conversations before we do anything meaningful. And that is what the government is definitely pushing on, which is what corrective consultation is that corrective voice, that corrective conversation.
Okay. And the last thing that I generally have no idea about, what's the Fair Work Agency?
Or Fair Work, God knows. I'm not sure I know a great deal, but no, it's going to be implemented in a few days, where it's 6th of April. Okay. What that will mean in practice will be very interesting. It's there to sit alongside ACAS, and it's there to take enforcement action and support workers in taking enforcement action when it comes to things like minimum wage, holidays, sick pay, that kind of thing. And it's going to have quite a lot of powers by the look of it, including the power to kind of come into a business and inspect records and check for compliance. And like I said, support workers in bringing claims to the tribunal, which is going to be another added layer when we're considering we see claims mounting, the backlogs in tribunal mounting. So that's going to be an added challenge. It'll be something to wait and see how powerful that turns out to be. We've seen it before. Enforcement bodies or regulatory bodies can be hugely effective or hugely ineffective, depending on how they're being framed. The plan is for that body to be quite significant in its powers and its ability to change things. It definitely is quite a big change from a government, from a legislation point of view. So it'll be interesting to see how that works and what that changes for us.
Yeah, I generally had no idea until I was doing some. You think you've read everything, and then you read stuff again. And before the webinars, I had not even seen this. Obviously, I've got a Fair Work Week in the US, but I didn't know what this was. So we will see. We will see. One key thing, they're all key things. I know I probably said that too many times today, and there's a lot to absorb. But around kind of dismissals and in hospitality, as an ex-operator myself, I always knew I had 2 years in my head. I had 2 years with any employee, right? And you could take a gamble on a hire. You could manage things in a short stint. What's changing?
And you're younger than me to be thinking you always had 2 years, because I still remember the time when it was 1 year, and that's when I started practicing. But yes, you're right. There is a big change. We're obviously cutting that into 6 months qualifying service, which is a massive change. I actually learned the other week that there was a 6 months qualifying service back in the 70s, or an equivalent to that. But that was obviously a long time ago, before the Employment Rights Act 96. So what that means is, as of January 2027, with immediate effect, anybody who's got six months service is going to be considered to have qualifying service. And that means they can bring a claim to the employment tribunal for unfair dismissal if they've not been dismissed in the right way, for the right reason, based on the legislation, and a little bit based on the ACAS code, although that's not a legally binding code. And that's going to obviously bring the option for a wider population to make those claims. Is it going to necessarily bring the claims up? I don't know, because we do have a lot of claims that are going around the house when they're unhappy with their dismissal, finding whistleblowing, discrimination, or other reasons to bring that challenge, that legal challenge. So it could make things a little bit simpler, and that people are focusing on, this is an unfair dismissal, as opposed to, I made a protected disclosure, and those kind of things, which actually are quite complex. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but 6 months is a very short period of time. And that means you're going to have to look at hiring right, and absolutely managing your probations right, and monitoring them, and not waiting until 6 months is up before you decide whether that person is going to be working for the business or not. And obviously making sure you do it right.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously minimum wage has increased up. I think there's a lot of pressure now. I think there has been over the last year on hiring right the first time, taking less of a gap, less of a risk even around any hiring that's happening, and this is laid in. But Nick, I know we've got kind of performance management module, we've got Engage 360. Do you want to touch upon some of the tooling that we have around, tracking performance potentially in someone's first 30, 60, 90 days, Harry?
I mean, yeah, we have got obviously our performance module, which obviously allows for doing the kind of important check-ins with employees to make sure they're achieving the goals you've set them out to be within that, obviously the time frame of that. Again, kind of doing the probation reviews as well after this 3-month period, 6-month period, whenever it might be as well. And even up to the yearly reviews, and it allows you to kind of set the guidance and also the timeframes around when you want this to be done, and ensuring that obviously the employees is achieving the goals which you set them out to do as well. So, and it all tracks it through the system. It's all reportable as well, and it offers that extra layer as such.
Yeah, we've been working with some big QSR brands in the US and the UK around this. One of the big QSR brands, over 1,000 locations, wanted to make sure that they got quality of hire and supporting people within their first 90 days and up to 180 days. Actually, now they're focusing around that. So this was all around, performance management check-ins. So we built the automation where it triggers managers at 30 days, at 60 days to do that check-in and make sure it's documented, and the templates are there to make sure that the conversations happen that need to happen. I think a lot of gray area happens in performance management check-ins. Nick, at your probation review, I remember just going, "Yeah, you're doing a great job, buddy." Like, there's not a lot of information there, but we're surfacing up a lot of information now across our system. You'll see Sally just here, new product coming to market at the moment. It's live with 300 users at the moment, and this product gives you the insights, because we know in a product, or you're going into reports, you're trying to find the information, but you want to know the information when you're in a workflow, right? So as you're building out a schedule, you want to be alerted in real time on a Saturday if someone has been late more than X number of times the last couple of weeks, or not shown up for their shift, and trigger workflows and check-ins on the back of that as well. So we're working on automating workflows to make managers aware of what's happening, and then to coach and support to make sure they have the conversations at the right time as well. So there's a lot happening in the Nick from that front.
Always.
And it's nice to have Nick on the call, because he's always in a dark room doing specs and wireframes and scoping out products. It's nice to have some light in your face, I guess.
I can see the light coming through, actually, so it's nice for a change.
Fair enough. So it's good, just some of the results in the polls so far. So before today, we are aware that your July 2026 hires will effectively be the first cohort protected by the 2027 unfair dismissal. So yeah, 50% pretty much knew of the changes, 30% already made adjustments, and 14 didn't know. So I think I was in that 14% in fairness if I was to be doing the poll. And with the removal of the 2-year service cap change, will the removal of the 2-year service cap change your hiring profile? 60% said yes, 40% somewhat, and no one said no, which is good to hear from everyone on today's call. And which element of the Employee Rights Act 2025 keeps you up most at night? The cost of day one statutory cost is 50% of the responses, and then liability for third-party harassment. So have you heard anything, Isabel, around kind of the cost implications around like potential uplift in costs? I was speaking to one operator last week, and they said, I generally don't care. It's going to cost me a couple of quid a day in SSP, and I'd rather there be a process. Have you had people concerned about the cost so much?
That's definitely been mentioned in a few of my calls in terms of the additional cost. I think that comes also on the back of fairly significant additional costs last year, isn't it, with national insurance contribution and all of those things. So whilst it may not be a huge cost per employee, it's in a wider business, it's significant, but it's really about how you manage that sickness. I don't think it's a bad thing because it actually forces people to manage and record properly. The number of times I've had people come to me and say, we need to manage this person because the absence record is poor. And then you look and it all says authorized absence, authorized absence, authorized absence. I mean, well, that's not sickness, is it? That's authorized. Yeah. So you need to record it right and manage it, and always manage it in line with the needs of the business. There's no point saying I'm going to dismiss anybody who's got 10 days absence a year. Does it impact on the business? Does it impact on the team? If it does, then I manage it. It's not about whose fault it is. It's about how you manage a business, it's about running the business. So I think it is definitely a concern. It is it's a cost. And if you add it up and you don't manage it right, it's going to be significant. But if anything, it might actually focus people's minds on how you manage sickness and managing it properly. And I've also heard on the other side of the coin, a lot of people being frustrated on the employee side, being frustrated to see sickness not being managed when it comes to their colleagues. So they say that there will be pros and cons in this. Yes, there are additional costs, but if it can help employers actually manage right, it may actually work out for the better.
Yeah, I think so. And in general, I think I know a lot of people on this call are stressed and want to make sure they're doing the right thing. But in fairness, I think a lot of the new changes are the right thing to do. It's just it's challenging when you're in a cost pressure industry in hospitality when every penny counts to the bottom line. But I think hiring right, retaining your best talent, managing, have no flexibility when it comes to poor performance. I think the last couple of years where we've had such high turnover, I think that reduced quite a bit last year. I think people need to go back to that, managing their employees, managing performance. What does the best employee look like in a business and per role as well, and documenting all those different things. And just before we kind of wrap up, Isabel, there's around the fire and rehire. I don't think we touched upon this today. What does that mean? What's coming?
I think that's probably one of the more controversial, at least from my point of view. As you said, a lot of the changes are pretty good changes, and then they're sensible changes. Qualifying service, does it need to be that short? I don't know. But a lot of the changes are fairly sensible. The fire and rehire for me is one of those political changes. It's just on the back of political kind of noise, and with the issues we've had with the P&O ferries kind of debacle a number of years ago, and it's a reactionary kind of piece of legislation, which I'm not sure will necessarily work. Effectively, what the government's trying to do is almost ban this fire and rehire, making it into a bad thing, and it isn't always a bad thing. It's necessary. You're changing terms because the business needs it. But what it looks like is we will not be able to do that, to kind of fire and rehire, change terms, unless the business is in absolute jeopardy, is on the brink of bankruptcy. When you don't have the same test when it comes to redundancy, that doesn't make sense. Why would we apply such a high threshold? Obviously, I know you're not paying people redundancy pay when you fire and rehire, but it's still led by business needs. It has to be led by business needs. And I've done fire and rehire many times over the years, not necessarily termed it like this, not necessarily you had to go all the way to firing and rehiring, but obviously part of that negotiation, part of that kind of close communication. What we're waiting to know is whether it will be very wide in the scope or whether there will be exceptions, such as if it's just a simple shift change, is that still okay? Because again, if I think of some of my clients, what they've done over the years, changing shift pattern, changing kind of hours thing, we need to be able to do that to manage the business. You need to be able to do that without being bored. I think the solution to that is going to be going back to what I said at the start. It's that corrective voice, getting that corrective agreement, getting the buy-in. Because obviously, if you get the buy-in of the staff, you're going to be able to circumvent all of this, because you'll never get to a position of actually terminating anybody, and you can actually achieve your business objective. So that goes back to that's the way forward for me, is bringing that corrective voice, ideally from the inside, rather than letting the unions coming and dictate how that's going to look. But again, that's down to the business and their relationship with unions. That's definitely going to be the way forward, because that's the way to manage this firing and rehiring situation. Also to manage to circumvent that guaranteed hours, because you can circumvent it with a corrective agreement, and a lot of the other legislation that's coming up, that's going to be a massive help in navigating it. So that would be the way forward. That's what the government wants. If you see throughout the changes, the way the unions are going to be able to come in more easily, they want that corrective voice. So I would say create the corrective voice before it's created for you, and that will absolutely help navigate everything that's happening at the moment.
That's fair. That's fair enough. And I know we're wrapping up in a second, but Nick, you work in product. You know, we do hundreds of releases every quarter. Like it's been a manic period for us at Harri. Is there anything that you're like excited to be working on at the moment at all? Or
it's nice to be working on. Where would I start and where would I stop with that question, really? There's lots of things, really. Next month, we've got a new feature come up which will allow you to kind of view within your timesheet section everything's kind of going on with the employees that week. So whether they've actually worked their shift, whether they've missed a shift, whether they've had a request in that week, it's all going to show up in the timesheet section. That's coming out next month. I'm currently working on instant tracking and being able to actually track and if an employee's got an issue within the workplace, actually them submitting that issue and it being then tracked from the point of submission to escalation to resolution as well. That full flow, ensuring it's dealt with and tracked again in the right ways. Lots of more things coming on for holidays. Throughout this, the list is endless.
I know you're a busy guy. You're actually just in the room next to me as well, so we catch up quite often on all these things. Yeah, we got a lot. We do have a lot coming in. It's exciting at Harri because obviously we have the platform. We have a lot of this data in one place, which surfaces the information in one area, which has been really beneficial to a lot of the operators across the pond and in the UK, as we know. But Isabel, any final thoughts that you want to give to the people listening today? I think
what we've got to do is try and navigate, what's going to be happening to the best of our abilities. Use the automation you're talking about. I think I'm a big fan of things like this. If it can help make our day job, better, then that's what we need. Definitely not a fan of ChatGPT and any of this nonsense, but definitely in terms of monitoring people and tracking and where they are. Ultimately, for me, it's not just about the legal risk, it's a practical aspect. What you want to avoid is not the claim, it's the possibility of a claim. It's not the claim being successful, it's a claim being brought to life in the first place, because that absolutely takes so much time and energy and resources, especially with the tribunal being backlogged the way they are. So what we need to think about is how do we engage the workforce to make sure that we don't get to that stage. And there's loads of things around there, there's help around there. It's getting the right help, getting the right tools, getting the right records in place, and trying to navigate it. Ultimately, it's probably a lot of good changes for everybody. It's just about how you navigate it and how you make the most of it.
Just realised the Q&A tab on the live. So I do apologise. I was looking at the chat and then just had a message on the side around this. Are there going to be any flags when there's a high number of sicknesses, Nick? I know Sally is going to surface kind of insights and flags like that, but
absence management is an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a big fan of using triggers and things. I find them too rigid. I don't think it addresses the real issue. I'm always very much about common sense approach, what's actually impacting on the business based on the kind of role that people are doing. Some absence levels are more, detrimental to the business than others. And it's about managing it in a sensible way. You can't say, well, my threshold is going to be 5 days and everybody's got 5 days absent in a year. You can't sack everybody. So how do you manage it on a day-to-day basis? It's about managing it consistently based on what it means for the business. And then on the side of that, putting the support mechanism to prevent it happening in the first place, which obviously we can all do in terms of, work-life balance, monitoring, looking at medical issues and those kind of things to try and mitigate those. So I wouldn't say there are red flags. It really has to be addressed based on the business.
Yeah, that's true. We do have like features in our product, especially around the Team Live app, where people can swap their shifts, automation approval, depend on the positions and things like that. But Nick, in regards to kind of flagging up in our system, apart from Sally giving you insights in the schedule, you're aware of anything?
I mean, for sickness specifically, we do obviously have the Bradford factor, obviously, which we show for sickness, and it's shown within all the employees' profiles. It's also reported within the team member master report as well. And we've built up the absence tracker, which highlights all instances of sickness, obviously, for all employees, and that can be viewed from an enterprise level as well. And as you kind of mentioned, Dan, obviously we're working on Sally. We're currently working on our request agent as well. A big part of that will be kind of sickness analysing and what's going on with employee sickness and general requests as well. So,
awesome, thank you. And Amelia, if that doesn't answer your question, you want to get some more insight, feel free to reach out. So all good there. But yeah, that's kind of it from us. It's been really good chatting to you guys. And Nick, thank you for joining as well. I know this is not your space. You don't like public speaking?
Not unlike, just more out of touch of doing public speaking, we'll say.
Yeah, that's true.
It's been a while anyway.
That's true. And Isabel, it's been great talking to you. Hopefully we do another breakfast gathering soon.
Yes, no problem. I like talking. That's definitely not a problem for me.
No, appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Do appreciate it. And hope you enjoy the sunshine today. I heard snow is coming apparently, so make the most of it. Appreciate it. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you.